because I think that one of the key things here is, in order to have healthier relationships on an interpersonal level, on a community level, on a national and an international level, we first have to really live in such a way that helps us develop better relationships internally. So really looking at the fundamental building block, which is my relationship with myself. If my relationship with myself is healthy, then it can then start to ripple out in a powerful, deep, and consistent way.
Welcome to Far Out Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I'm excited and delighted to be joined by Bhuta Bhavana Das. Let me tell you about this incredible man and the journey he's been on. Bhuta is an international speaker who works at the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern application, looking at how timeless codes of wisdom can inform modern problem solving and provide lasting solutions to many societal challenges. For over 25 years, he's been practicing and drawing insight from a system of philosophy and yoga named Bhakti Yoga. His quest for understanding life's deeper questions began at university, where his interest in Eastern philosophy, meditation, and personal development drew him towards the Bhakti tradition. For decades, he has engaged in speaking at many institutions around the world, including Oxford and Cambridge. He shares presentations that take the wisdom of Bhakti into the field of practical, transformative application, with a special emphasis on community development, leadership, relationships, and spiritual growth. He enjoys sharing penetrating insights, which I have experienced firsthand, having sat in a workshop of his when I was recently at Russell Brand's Community Festival. And his clarity of vision helps others to navigate their own life journey in a way that is healthy and truly progressive. So without further ado, Bhuta, thank you so much for beaming in. It's an honor to have you on the show, brother.
It's great to see you and great to be here as well. So thank you for inviting me to be on. I'm really glad to be here to connect with you.
Awesome. You're very welcome. You're very welcome, my friend. So, man, I heard you speak when I was on Hay on Wye, which is a place in Wales, I believe. That's where we were, in the middle of nowhere. It was very rainy at the festival and cold for a summer. But I'm told that is the norm for that place. I wasn't prepared. The pictures looked so sunny, from the previous year.
Yeah.
But it was a great time, and I got to hear some incredible individuals speak, you being one of them. So it was well worth the trip. And I reached out to Bhuta, and so Bhuta, where should we start, brother? You're very well known, and you're such an articulate speaker. But I guess let's start from the beginning a little bit, so my listeners have a little bit more of a background on how you came to be where you are.
Thank you. Yes. So, it's been a very interesting journey. I guess there's many different key points in the journey for me. When I was very young, I was always into just trying to understand deeper things about life. And one of the things I felt was really important for me was that when I was relatively young, I was about 13, I started meditating, looking at, understanding more about the mind, consciousness, psychology, and so on. So that was one milestone. And then also when I was at university in particular, we were studying philosophy and economics, so we were looking at different questions, meaning of life, what is the self? Am I the mind? Am I, something else? And I remember, because of certain things I'd been exposed to, things I'd read in the past, I knew that there was also Eastern philosophies that dealt with some of these questions, because we were looking at Western philosophers, Kant, Mills, etc. But I knew that there's also another angle on this, and that really invigorated my journey towards starting to study some of these Eastern teachings. And that's really got me on this path of understanding Bhakti Yoga, meditation, in various deeper ways, trying different systems of meditation, looking at different philosophies, and trying to see what are some of the universals, what are some of the kind of underlying principles or laws that help us to understand who we are, help us to understand life, and help us to find a sense of, I guess, calm within the storm, if you want to better term, but also to help us to get insight into navigating the things that we all deal with, whether it's relationships, work, understanding ourselves better, peace of mind, all of these different things. And I feel that it's been an incredibly rich journey with tremendous insights into the human condition and how we can live life in a way that really develops our consciousness and helps us to be the very best version of ourselves.
That's beautiful, man. And it's amazing when I think of a mind that has been, at least in some way, shape, or form, experimenting with meditation from that young age of 13. It's no wonder you're brimming with insight and you have so much to offer. I can't even imagine the clarity of mind that, I mean, and look, meditation, I think there's two side effects to it if you stay with it: insight, clarity, and compassion. That's been my experience since I've had a daily practice, and understanding. So it's incredible for me to meet someone who had that desire at such a young age. At 13, you were, I think you were definitely called to this path from a young age. Yeah. Amazing.
And I love what you said about the clarity and compassion. I think it's always a work in progress. So I'm not in any way claiming that I'm, there yet, but it's that I can honestly say it's helped me in so many ways, and when I see some of the challenges that people go through where there isn't necessarily that same clarity or that same kind of practice that can build some of that inner muscle, then I can see the difference. I really feel that we're coming to a time in the world where increasingly these practices, mindfulness, meditation, these things are increasingly necessary to stabilize us and to give us a sense of centeredness in an ever increasingly fast-paced world where everything is constantly moving and changing. I think there's even more need for there to be like a center of calm within the storm, and I think that's what these kinds of practices provide.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I would take it one step further, a little closer to the precipice of controversy, maybe. But I would say that these times and the kind of the chaos that has been brewing and forming and like the storm that you spoke of, to be able to have the clarity of mind and return to the self, and separate from what is being kind of pushed on people, it's becoming, I think, the greatest survival skill, because when you have that clarity and you're out of, when you get step back from the emotion and the things that are being propagandized and pushed and advertised and pumped over the radio waves, then you have this degree of safety and separation when you can see things a lot more clear, and you're less likely to get caught up, into the mix and the crowd of people who may not be able to discern what you're discerning, and you may be able to make a better decision for yourself, for your family. I always think that these days that's the greatest survival skill, is to be able to step out of the survival programs through meditation, through clarity, through these practices. It's so important now more than ever.
No, I completely agree, and I think what you're saying is a very important point. I really want to echo that. I was thinking about this the other day. What often happens in our modern society is, like, for example, in terms of advances in technology, often the narrative is how we can keep up with the technology, you know? And I think that there's also scope for a discussion on how we can have human-centered technology and technology that works at a human pace, you know, like that. So yeah, it's just really thinking about how to get that balance correct, you know. And I think that that's why you'll sometimes have people in whichever, you know, field looking at what are the long-term ramifications of this, and how do we make sure that things move in a direction which is healthy for human growth and development, you know. And I think that that's something that we have to really be mindful of.
I wish there was more, we had more people in positions of, you know, this we give people these positions of authority, which is another topic of discussion that we don't need to get into in this podcast. But you know, and they have less concern and more concern for, you know, the bottom line. So it's really the responsibility falls back to us, you know, as the silent majority and the true power, you know, the people of countries and nations, and from the micro to the macro. That's where the power lies, in that collective consciousness. But most people are not aware that they have that power, you know, and we've given it away at every turn. But what I love about what you're saying is, you know, why would you develop a program that's going to put people out of work? Oh, that's right. You haven't, but the corporations have, you know, because that's less people to pay. You know what I mean? If society is being run by people who are putting the quality of life and you know, people actually first, then you wouldn't have the discussions that we're having today about, well, is AI going to put everyone out of business? Why would you develop something that's going to put people out of house and home? You know what I'm saying? It's like we're developing ways to get in trouble as opposed to ways to get ourselves out of trouble. It's always, and of course, that has to do with the revenue.
Money's, you know, it's an interesting point you're making. You know, money, it's, I guess one way to put it is, and going back to the point that was made earlier, we have to really think what is healthy for human development and flourishing, you know. And if we have that as our center, and then build around that understanding, then I think there can be tremendous, you know, development. And development, not necessarily just meaning external developments, but development in terms of a greater degree of inner peace, inner stability, which then will also ripple out in terms of better quality of relationships. Because I think that one of the key things here is, in order to have healthier relationships on an interpersonal level, on a community level, on a national and an international level, we first have to really live in such a way that helps us develop better relationships internally. So really looking at the fundamental building block, which is my relationship with myself. If my relationship with myself is healthy, then it can then start to ripple out in a powerful, deep, and consistent way in terms of my relationships with those close to me, etc., etc. And I think that where we often make a mistake in the modern society is we are focused so much externally that we forget the internal foundations that actually create a lasting positive external result. You know, it's almost like jumping. It's like building a house and ignoring the foundations. We're building all of these other things, but actually, if the foundations aren't secure, everything that we build on top of it is actually going to eventually lead to some kind of, you know, let's say suboptimal outcomes. Yeah.
So, and you could save so much time if you started with the foundation. If you know, because you're gonna have to go back, continuously go back and rebuild and strengthen and prop up, and you know. But if the foundation isn't there, you're spinning your wheels. You know, you're putting the cart before the horse
Absolutely.
over and over. So it's such a profound point that you're making. It's always back. And then what happens is if then when we get people who come into whatever leadership position that they're in,
Hmm.
when they have this foundation, then there's truly less, there's no cause for concern or worry. The person up there they've established the kind of thinking and mindset that you need in a leader, as opposed to some of what we have going on now, which is very far from that, to
Yeah.
say the least. But yeah, it's a great point you make. It's always a return. All the profound changes begin here, with the self, and then ripple out. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's like you said also, which I really think is really important. It's that recognition of our own personal power. You touched upon that point, which I think, again, is absolutely essential. We have to recognize that actually we can do something, and even if one person works on him or herself, that makes a big difference. Being that role model, being that example, developing that integrity, that strength of character, it makes a big difference, and it rubs off, it ripples
Oh yeah.
out into the environment, and the example, it also inspires hope in other people that this is possible and that these things can be done. I think these are some things that we really need to promote in the world and in society.
Absolutely. This is that's how we change the world, truly. You can make all the external fixes you want, and they will not last. What you need is the internal infrastructure to be fortified and then spread out, and then those changes will happen before your eyes. We won't even have to. You won't even have to try to. God, what you're saying is so profound and so true, and it always begins with the self. I mean, anyone who has taken this journey in any way and made significant changes to themselves, just look around you. I mean, all the evidence that you need to have how true this is everywhere. I see it with my wife and my children, and my friends, who I was in proximity with, and how it just like a wave, it has affected them and set them on their own path, as I continue on mine. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. I think it's such a gift. But that's how we change the world, truly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what I want to know, brother, I'm so curious about is you got into these. How did you pick the traditions that drew you? And what exactly were the ones that you like? Where do they come from? And I was you know doing some homework on you, and I saw videos about Krishna consciousness, and I was like, oh, I don't know enough about some of those ancient traditions and where they come from. I would love for you to give me a little education on some of those wonderful traditions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a very so Krishna consciousness. Another name for that um, spiritual path, for want of a better term, is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti means love and devotion or devotional service. Yoga, I mean, it's obviously a popular word, and there's many different understandings of it. But the words yoga is a Sanskrit word in ancient Indian language, and yoga, amongst many meanings, it also means to connect or to unite. So literally, you could say in one sense that this path, this spiritual path, is the path of loving devotional service
Mm.
to the Supreme. So when I was doing my undergraduate degree, we were looking at many different things. We also looked at logic, and I was trained to be very rigorous, very logical, very rational in my analysis of anything. So one of the things that was amazing for me is that as I was looking at different books of wisdom, different traditions, and so on, when I came across the books of Bhakti Yoga, for example, one of the most famous in that canon is Bhagavad Gita.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So Bhagavad Gita as it is, when I started to look into these literatures, what amazed me, what thrilled me is that I found a coherent philosophy that explained that we're all brothers and sisters, right? So, we have different nationalities, different gender, different age, right? Different races, but we're brothers and sisters by consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
We're all part of the same divine family, And so it was really speaking to this idea that our self-interest lies in helping each other to raise our consciousness and to develop our genuine loving tendency. Right now in the world, people can get into arguments, wars, unfortunately, different conflicts that we're seeing. And often it's due to a kind of polarization and a kind of distrust, in-group, out-group, etc. And one of the things I found really beautiful about the Bhakti Yoga tradition is it was calling us to understand that how I deal with you is how I'm also being prepared to deal with myself. Because what goes around comes around. I strongly believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, it was this idea of uniting together as divine family members and encouraging and assisting each other to raise our consciousness, raise our devotion, and to do that by means of service to the Supreme, and that really spoke to me. It spoke to me philosophically. It spoke to me intellectually. There was a great deal of fun. There's so many ways in which one can express that loving service, and I found it was very much something that could be easily what's the word I'm looking for? That could easily connect with however people are living, right? So people
Applicable,
can,
maybe, yeah.
people can, you can have you can have people living, in many different lifestyles. Some living just on the lands, very simply. Others living in the city, doing like just your regular jobs and so on. And I could see that with Bhakti Yoga, people from all different walks of life and backgrounds could engage in some way that connects them to the Supreme, and also in a very joyful way. And so one of the most powerful practices in Bhakti Yoga, they call it Kirtan, right? So it's a big craze in the yoga crowd, in the yoga scene in particular. So this it's called the science of sacred sound or mantra meditation. It's like a call and response, way of engaging in devotional service, engaging in a very joyful or celebratory musical, but also spiritual experience. And it happens across the world in all cultures, many different areas of the world. And I found it also to be something that you could tangibly do, but also you find that you can feel that it's uplifting your spirit, giving you a sense of joy, giving you a sense of spiritual strength, like you said earlier, that allows you to handle the day-to-day challenges of life, but in a very, very positive way. So yeah, that's a little bit of a background.
So that's it's what when I hear you say that, I think of like I've gone on many retreats, and one of them was with the I don't know what you would call it, but it was Drunvalo Melchizedek, and his I think it's called it's the School of the Flower of Life, I think is the name of his system, and they do these workshops, and they're heart opening workshops, and there's all these wonderful ceremonies and practices and meditations that go into it. But one of them was, we were oming, and we were for an extended period of time, and I had never kind of put myself into a meditative trance with sound like that before, and it was so powerful. It was, and I remember I had an injury that I had been bothering me for about 6 months from I was boxing, and I hurt myself. And after this session, that following day, and then I woke up the next morning, and all that pain in my arm was gone, and I was like, I was a little shocked. But I told the teacher, the guide, and she was like, it's, that is the divine energy coming in, and it has healing, it has incredible healing qualities, very uplifting. But I just remember being, moved by how powerful when we create those sounds and then we're in that state. It's so powerful. Is there another example you can think of so people have a little more of an idea of how that becomes incorporated into the tradition?
Yeah. So I mean, it's first of all, this point about sound is very significant. Every day you go online, that there's so much material that's out there uploaded and so on. We know that sound has a very special effect on the mind and on consciousness. So in the Bhakti Yoga tradition, we actually also highly esteem sacred sound. And by sacred sound, we use mantras, mantras consisting of different names of the Supreme. So you mentioned Krishna consciousness. Krishna is one name. Ram is a name. Another name is Hare. And that by calling upon those names, it's a certain type of spiritual practice, which can help to free the mind from some of the more, let's say, base elements, the things that within ourselves that we don't necessarily always appreciate, anger, greed, etc. And it can also help to elevate the mind and elevate us to our natural state. So literature such as the Bhagavad Gita, they help us to understand that we're ultimately loving beings, loving spiritual beings. But that deep spiritual nature can often be covered in the modern world, in the modern ways of life. And this practice helps to really uncover that, to bring the consciousness back to its pure state of loving devotion to the Supreme. And that state is a state of deep joy, as you said, deep clarity, deep wisdom, and also deep ecstasy, deep bliss. I was thinking the other day that often what happens is when people get into conflicts and so on, it's a reflection of some inner disharmony. It's a reflection of some kind of, emptiness or unhappiness inside, which then becomes externalized. And what we really need to do, again, this idea of helping society from the inside out, is to connect with that deep joy. Because when I feel whole, when I feel complete, when I feel at peace and at harmony within myself, then it's easier for me to share that sense of contentment in the outer world. Otherwise, if I'm already chaotic and dissatisfied and negative inside, it just adds to more of the confusion that we often see in the world at the moment. So again, I really believe that these types of spiritual, divine-centered practices, they can make a huge difference. And also, I mean, they're also incredible fun. I have some friends who have a program called Mantra Lounge in London. And every Friday, people get together, about 75, 80 people. And it's basically like a spiritual dance, and so, a spiritual party,
Yeah.
They're singing in unison. They're getting all that huge kind of uplift in terms of the mind. They connect socially, they make friendships, so many things. And these things go on all around the world. And there are many famous celebrities also who've been into Kirtan, and that kind of culture. I know that, it's something that's taken off.
How do you spell Kirtan?
Kirtan is spelled Kirtan. Yeah.
Okay. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a call and response kind of mantra meditation, like with music, with instruments. It's very, very beautiful. Very, very satisfying to the heart, I'd say.
Yeah. That's amazing. That sounds like what church is supposed to be. Yeah. It's such a synchronicity. I was doing a thing last night on Instagram, and every Saturday I do like a live broadcast, and I'm just sharing some of my insights. And I was talking about religions, and some of what I believe to be are the pitfalls of religion. Very controversial, to take on this topic. But I remember I was raised Catholic, which is a lot of dogma and hell and brimstone and guilt and shame, and I don't know. I don't know how much guilt and shame works as a learning tool. I mean, it's not the most effective way to teach people anything, and let alone instill a belief system around. So there's a lot of pitfalls with it, but at the same time, religions tend to separate God from people, and say, look, if you want to talk to God, that's cool. Come talk to the priest and he'll relay the message. At least Catholicism, and I was like, I have such a problem with that, because then people are born into, and immediately their parents, have this notion that they need to be, that they're not born clean, I mean, especially some of the Christian and the baptisms, and like this notion of original. And I trying to talk to people that, because I was, when you become, I'm a parent, and I have children, and this notion of hell, and I was like, listen, I'm just a human being, okay, and I can tell you right now, I love my children so much that there's nothing that they could do ever that would make me banish them to an eternal suffering, for them to figure it out. There's nothing. And I'm just a man. I was like, do you imagine the creator to be, I mean, less loving than me? I don't think so. It's
great point. That's a great
point. So it's hard, but people, belief systems are just that. They're belief systems. So I got to be careful what I'm saying when I have these talks, because I don't want to offend anyone, but I just share some of the insight I've come to, how we project all these qualities onto the creator. And the creator doesn't come with those. We are, that's what we're doing here in relationship to each other. But, it's incredible what you said, about us being, the other thing I talk about is the fact that we are all brothers and sisters. We were all born of this earth, and we could nitpick about race and nationality and all that. But the truth is we are all human brothers and sisters, and we have the same mother. We were born on this planet. Even if you want to argue over who the father was, with religion and all that, the mother is the same, right? We're all born here on earth. We are children of the earth, of Gaia, whatever you want to call her. And that makes us family, right?
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's being lost, unfortunately. Well, I feel like there's people working towards that, reminding us of that, and there's people who would rather we forget that kind of understanding. So when I heard you talk, I was like, I got to talk further with him. So
this is really important. This is really important. We do need that unity. We there's a very interesting point. This idea of unity with diversity. We are individuals, right? And people have their own. Everyone has their own unique characteristics, personality, attributes. That's absolutely there, and it's a feature of reality. So that's nothing wrong with that. We're not trying to crush that. Along with that, it's I think Dr. Gabor Mate speaks about this very nicely. He talks about the need for authenticity and attachment. So authenticity means that uniqueness, that individuality is recognized, and it's helped. It's kind of nourished in a way that we express our individuality in ways which are healthy for ourselves and for the community. Definitely, that's there. And along with that authenticity, it is also an inherent need for all of us that we have attachment, that we have connections, that we are part of community, that we feel that sense of community bonding. We met at the Russell Brand community event, and it was a wonderful event. But for a number of reasons, that was one of them. You saw people coming together, thousands of people over a few days, and really you could see the caliber of the people, the interest in community, the interest in helping to have a healthy social cohesion. It was extraordinary, you know. And I think that often what happens is we sometimes may lean into one at the you know, while ignoring the other, but actually both are important, you know. So I firmly believe in that healthy unity and healthy diversity, that will be the kind of the path that will stay the distance, you know. We need both, and I think that's really important. Just to echo what you were saying.
Yeah, we do. We do need both, and I think we will need it more, you know, in the coming months and days. And you know, we're kind of there seems to be a great transition happening now,
Yes.
and you know, there's an infinite amount of possibilities that are coming into existence. So you know, it will be the choices of the collective that decide where, you know, where we end up as a society, and how much more course correcting needs to be done. You know, because we put ourselves in a position where things can't exactly go on the way they have been, for a lot of reasons. And so I think that these talks and these, you know, community is going to become a very, very important word. You know, it's already a very important word, but you know, I think that the more the community in all of its, you know, facets and manifestations in the world can realize how much, you know, there's a lot less to worry about when you know your neighbor is there for you, and you live just in a small community where it's like, if I'm not worried, because if I run out of something, I could just go ask, you know, John. You know, John, he's always, and if not, I could go ask, you know, Katie, who lives 3 doors. I mean, there's a sense of security that comes with that. So it's an incredible thing to have community, and I think if people realize that, there'd be a lot less to worry about, and to allow fear to creep into our decisions. If we knew we had each other, what would we need to worry about?
Yeah.
You
You
know?
mentioned a great point, you know, and I think that a lot of insecurity comes when we feel that we're alone, we're isolated, we're alone, and we have to kind of basically fend for ourselves. You know, there's so in terms of Bhakti Yoga, the wisdom text on which it's based, I mentioned Bhagavad Gita, etc., and these literatures are over 5,000 years old. One of the interesting things that it mentions is that in this time in the world, it's called the age of Kali, and it's considered to be an age um, which is, I guess, um, which is full of, let's say, full of quarrel and hypocrisy. And one of the things that I think is really important, you know, related to what you were saying about community, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy means that any marriage, family, community, you know, nation, which is able to be healthy and progressive, is one where people have learned to deal with disagreements in a healthy way. You know, so we have different views, and sometimes we'll see the world in a different perspective. We may have different ideas about how things should proceed, but if we're able to respect one another and listen to one another and consider different perspectives in a healthy way, but also in light of, I'd often say, in light of higher knowledge, then that can help us to make decisions which are not just good for us in the short term, but also that will be good for us and future generations, even going into the long term, you know? So I think that that's one of the things we have to be mindful of if we're going to have healthy communities, that how do we create communities whereby we're able to respect, hear, dialogue, and come to conclusions which are not just healthy in the moment, because sometimes there's so much short-term thinking. People do things which are expedient now, but the ripple-on effects can be devastating later on, you know? Yeah, and I think that's something that we really need to look at as a global society?
That's a 1000% true statement. I mean, across the board. I'm reading a book right now by Darren O'Lean,
Mhm.
who's been a guest on my podcast. He's on that show with Zac Efron called Down to Earth with Zac Efron. It's a Netflix show. It's cool. Him and Zac travel to different locations around the world, and they look at they went to France and they visited this monastery that has a body of water, which all these people have stepped into and been healed miraculously. And because it's the Catholic Church, they document the miracles. And so they went and they looked at the water. They do. It's a pretty cool show. I don't watch a lot of TV, but this show is a positive show, and they look at different energy systems and
Wow,
alternative
sounds
stuff like
interesting.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great idea, and it kind of caught on. But he wrote a book called Fatal Conveniences, and it's about the things that have come up, were created and put on the market because they allow for incredible convenience, for people. But the all the focus was on getting the product out and not on well, is what are the chemicals in it? Is it healthy? You know. So the problem is we have all these wonderful conveniences in our society, but the work was never done to see if they're safe.
Mm.
And so you have a lot of people, particularly in America, who are exposed to all, these toxic, a cell phone is a great example. It's very convenient, to have a computer at your fingertips, to
Yeah.
just use whenever you want. But, using it all the time, the LED screen is very powerful and not very good for the eyes. And it disrupts the hormones.
Yes.
Um, and so we don't think about those things, and we don't teach people about how to be careful with them. And so you have all these, I mean, side effects. It's a funny word, side effects. Side effects are effects. To the person experiencing them, those are effects.
Hmm.
But we call them side effects. And so we have to look at um, the long term. We have to come into I think, a much greater habitual state of doing that if we're going to not repeat some of the complete atrocities of the industrial age, and rolling things out and finding ways to sell things and not think, I mean, like, look at another example that Darren uses in his book is, Teflon.
Yeah.
It's great. You can make a pan virtually invincible. Fantastic. And it's nonstick. How convenient, but meanwhile, those chemicals are slowly but surely leaching into the people using the pans,
Yeah.
and they cause a lot of damage to the body. So it's like, what's the alternative? I have like stainless steel now, and my pots, they're great, except when you try to cook out of them, everything sticks to them. But it's like, what's the alternative? So
Yeah.
you got to measure convenience versus long-term health.
I
And
think
and
this. I
yeah,
think
go
this
ahead.
is really, really such a powerful point. I was speaking to some friends of mine about this recently. So one of the things I've tried to do over many years is to take certain types of timeless wisdom and to try to see what are their implications. And to your point, which I completely agree with, we have to think about how we're balancing this relationship with technology to make sure that it's healthy. And there's a formula that keeps coming to me when I look at this kind of subject matter. And what I'm thinking for the global society is that one of the ways in which we can find a balance with the degree of technology and all these different things, which are, as you said, wildly convenient, incredibly convenient, but sometimes do have other implications, let's say. And you've talked about some, like, the blue light, its effect on the circadian rhythms, how it affects the hormones that are released, whether it's melatonin in the evening, which is meant to be released so we can get a good night's sleep, etc. What I've seen as a formula is that in order to balance what we could call the technology, let's say that the artificial, in order to balance the artificial, we need to have a very good amount of the natural, you know? So for example, what they found is if you if your sleep cycle is aligned with the natural cycle, right? So, you're sleep in the evening as it goes dark, you'll wake up, around the, with the sunrise or, relatively early. That also helps to rebalance the circadian rhythms, which also then affect the hormones in the body, which also have some effect upon our mind, right? If we're able to, there's a whole thing about what they call grounding.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure you'll be familiar with it. So, having some, being out in nature, being in direct contact with Mother Earth, whether it's bare feet or, you're just, in touch against the trees or whatever it is. And then what they found in the research is it can actually reduce inflammation in the body, right? It actually has all kinds of positive effects on the physiology as well. So again and again, this theme comes up to me, this idea that we balance the artificial by also being more and more grounded in the natural. And I really see that that's a huge opportunity for humanity. I'm not seeing that technology is suddenly going to stop. In fact, it seems that the rate of change in technology is going to skyrocket. So what I'm seeing as a realistic opportunity is more of those natural practices, living in line with the natural cycles more, spending time in nature more, which has also been found to have a balancing effect on the mind, a balancing effect on the hormones as well. One study found that when you see the color green in nature, from leaves, from grass, etc., it actually helps to bring down that sense of, or rather, let's say, to increase a sense of calm and peace within the mind. So all of these things I think are real opportunities, which I think as a society, I mean, there are pockets of people, I see yourself as one of them, who are aware of these things, right? You'll discuss this with people, you'll be aware of this, but there are many, I'd say large parts of society which are unaware of the significance and the value of getting that balance right.
Yeah.
And so by that, I don't just mean a digital detox. It's not just like, oh, don't look at your phone so much. Okay, that's one thing. And that I'm not against that. I think that's useful not to get overly, involved in every 5 seconds looking at the phone. But we also need those natural balancing practices. And I think both time in nature, time with loved ones, and also meditation and so on. All of those things can help to rebalance. And I think we really will need that more and more as we go into the future. Someone was telling me the other day that there's even something called AI anxiety, right? So people in anticipation of the effects of technology, they're becoming increasingly anxious. What does it mean? What's it going to do? What's the implications? And I think, again, I see more and more that if we think about that which is more natural, and we bring that in, like when I was young, just using food which didn't have different kinds of chemicals and on there, that was just called normal. Right now, you pay more money.
Now you got to pay extra for
organic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like it's organic. So if you don't put chemicals, you're going to charge me more money.
Yeah, that's the society we live in. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. But and it's like how did we end up in a society where if you want to eat healthy, you're gonna have to pay up. If you want to eat stuff that is very, very little to no nutritional value, and will eventually cause an early death, that stuff is cheap. Anyone can buy that stuff. And then they look and they say, oh, well, you can see that, among minorities and people who are poor, their health track records are the worst. I wonder why. Is it a mystery? Does it have to do with the color of their skin, or does it have to do with the society that they live in and the way it's set up and the food that they can afford, the only food they can afford to eat? It's amazing how the phrase, a correlation does not equal causation is thrown around and used, for different purposes, but yet it can, and it does. If people were to pursue the science, they would see that it has everything to do with that. and less to do with the other things.
No,
I always see that. But I, what you're talking about, I think is super important, and the fact that people are having anxiety about a future with a program that is going to achieve, a modicum of sentience, and meanwhile we're sentient. I think the anxiety is less about the AI and about who is going to use it for what purposes, right?
Yeah.
Because there's been a lot of distrust sown by some of these organizations and governments, rightfully so. I mean, the distrust it should have been there before. It was only ignorance that I think allows people to trust at this point, people who don't know better.
I think no, it's a major point you're making. I think that you see in certain ancient traditions. So, for example, the Bhagavad Gita, as it is part of a wider literature called the Mahabharata, which is a very famous epic, and it teaches many different topics, including there's a huge series of teachings on leadership. And in ancient cultures, it was understood that if you're a leader, you are also held karmically responsible for the people that you're leading. You see? And I always think about this. Many people, they want to be in charge, but they don't actually know that it's not just like you being in charge and then you call the shots, you tell people what to do, and you have all the power. If you're in charge, if you have responsibility, you'll be held accountable. And I often think that because people are not aware of the karmic responsibility that comes along with taking such positions, then you get many people clamoring for those positions of so-called power without really understanding the responsibility that will come along with it, whether they like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a great opportunity to have more healthy leadership in the world, and one of the ways in which that can be done is by helping people to understand the accountability that comes along with that. We need more leaders who are people oriented and who are able to be selfless and considerate of the real needs of the people that they are looking after.
Yes.
And I think if more of that can come out in the world, then it can move humanity in a very healthy and positive direction. If we don't have that, then we will get more and more conflict, more and more exploitation, and it'll cause a breakdown eventually because, as you said rightly, we've seen a huge breakdown of trust. Huge. I mean, it's huge, and it's a lot to do with leadership that has not lived up to its responsibilities.
Its promises, its responsibilities.
Yeah.
What it is supposed to be in place for. And so there's two things that the flip side of what you're saying, fascinating, that there are those who operate from the shadows who do understand to a large degree the karmic responsibility of leadership, and so therefore make sure that the people who end up in charge, are the ones who they can manipulate, so that they can pass that off. They at least, that's the idea. That's why you have some of the most powerful economic, interests and families who keep their name, out of the limelight, but meanwhile, are pressuring and using their power to push governments into these decisions, which are not for the people at all. They're for their own agenda. And, at the same time, I know that those people understand, that they're trying to put layers between the karmic responsibility and the suffering they're causing by using the politicians to do their dirty work. Now, whether it's working or not, I don't know. Because some of us, are very well aware that, the leadership and the decisions that are being made, are being pushed on them, because we can see the pattern. We can see all the choices and all the scripts they're written the same. You know what I mean? So obviously, someone is calling the shots. When every politician's coming out and saying the same thing, you're like, wait a minute, who's writing their scripts? Who's doing the writing? It becomes clear. So like that, the other side of it is, you better believe that those people understand this, and they do their best to keep others from the understanding of it. But it's so important to get it out, I think, into the consciousness of people, because I always say this: we need to raise our leaders the right way. That is the other way that we're going to be able to institute change with anything that resembles the current structure of government, or so-called authority. You better believe that these parties raise their own, to be put into the. I mean, perfect example is the Bush family. Prescott Bush. He raised George and Jeb and Marvin. That whole family. They've been taught from a young age. They've been indoctrinated into a way of thinking that is not kind to those of us who are considered civilians. It's a very aristocratic belief system that separates the rich from, the ultra rich, I should say, from everyone else, and teaches them to manage us as resources like you would a herd of sheep or cattle. It's a very sociopathic indoctrination that these families give their children and raise them to be leaders. We need to do the opposite, and we need to do it I think in numbers that will, so that we can overcome that as an adversary, because people are going to choose someone who they know is truly looking out for them. They're going to stop being duped by the song and dance they get from politicians, and if someone has a track record from the time that they're younger, going in of doing the right thing and helping people and not selling out, those people are going to be pushed into the leadership positions. And I just think that we need to start teaching our young people this now, to make them kind of immune from this kind of corporate corruption that happens even to the best when they get into position. Because then what happens is they don't make it very far.
I think
Or if they do, they're taken out. I mean, at least in America.
I think that's a great point. It's a really important. I really liked what you said about the young generation. I think wherever we can, we should empower them, and also with clear understanding about how their best interest is aligned with the best interest of the people that they're serving. Mm. As you said, it's not a question of them and us. It's like we're all part of one community. What I do to you is what's going to happen to me, And if I live with that understanding, then instead of exploitation, there will actually be encouragement and empowerment, right? Instead of neglect, there'll actually be nurturing. Instead of taking, there'll actually be giving. And I think that's the culture we need to have. And so I agree with the point that we must see what we can do to have a better caliber of leader. And I think that, yes, definitely the next generation, they're an opportunity to really empower them, help them to understand the importance of leadership. I was reading one book. It's called Leadership for an Age of Higher Consciousness Part 2. It's written by a mentor of mine. And he was talking about a very interesting point. He said that the importance of good leadership is absolutely true. At the same time, there's also significance in helping people to recognize good leadership. I sometimes wonder if a good leader would always be embraced, because you have so much propaganda around that even if someone was a good leader, someone who's got more money, a flashier advertising campaign,
better marketing team,
more money, whatever it is, they could actually, just completely, bombard the public with their kind of images and etc., etc. And people may not necessarily know where the actual authentic leadership example is, and they may even choose counterfeit or inauthentic leadership over authentic leadership as well. So I think it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge for modern society. But I'm always an optimist.
yeah.
I always feel that if we do what we can, we'll make some inroads.
And yeah, I'm sorry, my dog just yelped in her sleep and scared me. No, you're absolutely right. And we live in a world where there is an infinite amount of possibilities, and I think that even the best laid plans, can be disrupted. Mike Tyson famously said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." And it's true, but it's like that for both sides. You know what I'm saying? And where there's a will, there's a way. So I just think that people have to continue to put their minds and their consciousness into how do we create the conditions for a truly progressive society, not the hijacked notion of progression, which is really a paring down of sovereignty and handing over power to these centralized institutions, which will be, that is a different route. That is not, I don't think, a route to true happiness. I see the way it works in places like China and North Korea. And of course, the videos all make the people seem very happy, but they're also not allowed to be on video if they're unhappy. So, it's interesting. Everybody has a different idea about what would make a happy society. And that's where we get into trouble. It's like everyone thinks they know best. But, I guess I'm becoming more of what in America we call it a libertarian, which is basically why don't you, the less we hear from the quote government or any authority, the happier we are. Just let us live our lives, maybe fix a street once in a while. That's what you're supposed to be. Whatever you're doing with, half of our paycheck that you take every single time, our hard-earned money comes in, maybe fix something. I don't know, do something, but leave us alone. You know what I mean? Stop interfering in everyday existence and interjecting. And that's kind of the libertarian. And I'm more and more I'm leaning towards that. Although that alone will get you on the government list in America. But I just feel like freedom and joy. It's like you were mentioning earlier. Love, freedom, and joy. These words become interchangeable, and they go together. And so when you start to take away people's freedoms and and take away their joys, you're setting the stage for a societal revolution, because it is in our nature to experience these. That I believe that's part of the reason why we're here. So you're gonna, like China is. Look, I don't care. Whatever you teach the human spirit will win out in the end. And so that society it's going to collapse. There's going to be a revolution. You cannot keep people in a mental slavery, and in many ways a physical slavery, doing labor and working for the state for so long. It's just not. There's gonna be a revolt. It's gonna be messy the longer it goes on. So I just think, why wait for the crisis? We need to start creating the society we want now, right? With conversations like this and spreading consciousness.
We definitely need to spread consciousness. I think a lot of it also has to do with really understanding what are healthy values. I think about this a lot. What's required for healthy human thriving? And definitely the economic situation is definitely a key part of it. People need facility and so on, and I think that's very, very essential. And I think at the same time, we do need, and you talked about this earlier, we need to have a way of living that also takes into account our inner needs. One concern I have is that if in a society which just keeps giving the message that happiness is just about consumption. You buy this, you buy that, you buy this, you buy that, but that's gonna make people content. I see that that's not true. We see that again and again throughout society. Sometimes even people who've got the most so-called material facility can be suffering from depression, anxiety, feeling suicidal. So we know that that's not the formula. That's not, that again, not that we're against people having facility, right? We need to have certain facility, house, whatever. We're not against that. But to say that that's it, if you just get more money or more facility, everything will be fine. It's not true. And I think it's about recognizing on a societal level that along with taking care of the physical needs, we do need to look after ourselves emotionally and mentally. And I would go so far as to say also, we have to look after ourselves spiritually, And it seems to me, I think what's coming to my mind is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That if we're taking care of those stages in a healthy and consistent way, for me, that seems a more powerful and consistent formula for human flourishing than just a kind of very narrow emphasis on economic development at the expense of so many of these other dimensions of the self. And I think that that's part of the issue that we have, is that this has been what's been promoted across the globe, actually. If we just develop economically, everything will be taken care of. And it's like, no. It's an element of development. Really, we're not looking at, we don't want people to be in poverty and stuff like that. They do need facility. But at the same time, that's not the entire picture.
No, it's
and I
not.
think that's important.
It's very important. And it's been, they've been, even with the sole emphasis on the measure of success being economic and financial, they have been unable to, and that gets into some of my beliefs, that it is also by design that, America, the land of the free, we put a system in place back in the, I think it was 1913, 1914, that was supposed to secure the currency in this country in a way that would allow the class divide to become less and less and less, and it would allow for stability in the economy, and so it kind of it gave away the United States government's ability to control its own currency. Of course, I'm referring to the Federal Reserve, which is a central banking system that basically was adopted from Europe, from Britain. One of the reasons why we started America was to free ourselves from this kind of system, where all taxes were going to the king, the government, and that there was no way around it. And then, of course, we got here, we started the country. Those players infiltrated. They got a lot of money to push their way through. They deceived Congress into thinking that they sold the bill under this, under all this BS about it being, this is going to make sure that we don't have a depression. Bam! 8 years later, not even 8 years later, the first depression hit. And it's served to do the opposite, right? And now it's 2023, and we see that the economics in this country are on the verge of collapse, and people are struggling. People are working 3 jobs, and they still can't afford, to send their kids to school. And so the system is a failure. But in a lot of ways, the system that they have in place was designed to fail, to keep people in debt. Because if you keep people in a state of survival, then it's very difficult for them to flourish creatively and consciously, right? That's what survival states keep us from that. And, literally. So you have this amazing kind of two forces at work in society. You even as people become more aware, the people who are controlling the circumstances make sure that they're too busy on that third job to truly become conscious of what's happening and how they're being manipulated. And that's by design. So I just think that it's even greater importance and challenge for people to, regardless of their situations, stop and check in with the self and begin to create, because also that changes your outer circumstances. When the mindset changes and the belief system change, then your world starts to reflect those changes in the physical.
Yeah.
And so I just think that, God, it's the more we can spread this to everybody so that they understand a little bit about how reality works, and how they can become their own master of it, regardless of where they're stuck at, or where they feel stuck at. I mean,
This is really powerful. I loved what you said about people having time to think. I've seen in my I mean honestly, I've seen the effect of that. I've seen in my own life, having that in making some regular space for introspection. It's revolutionary. I can tell you honestly, it's so powerful. It allows you to take inventory. It allows you to build awareness, actually, to kind of just be aware what's going on with me, what's going on within me, what's going on between myself and other people. I'm always thinking nowadays about these three areas: reflection, resilience, and relationship. And I think that these are keys that can really help us on an individual, collective, and societal level. So you talked about, taking time to step back and to think. That's reflection, right? So what's happening for me, right? What are the trends that I'm seeing in my life, and what do I need to pay attention to? Because I think sometimes life itself gives us a heads up. Like, just something can blip on the radar. I'm sure you've experienced that. You get like some early warning signs, like maybe just give a bit more attention to your health, or there's a relationship that like maybe this friend, this thing seems to be, you guys seem to be getting a bit distant. Maybe this needs some attention. So reflection is definitely something that I've seen can make a huge difference. It's made a huge difference in my life, and I see it with others. The second one is just resilience, because you touched upon this, like not getting overly enamored by technology, right? What are my practices and what are my daily or weekly practices around my health? What kind of food am I eating? Am I exercising regularly? Am I getting fresh sunlight? Am I drinking enough water? I mean, I know in the UK, one of the things that people can, that many people are doing to make sure that they don't have to visit the doctor so much, is to just do a few small things regularly. I know that I'm into breathwork, different pranayama or breathwork practices, and they're phenomenal. They can make a huge difference to your physical health. So the reflection piece, I think, is key. You touched upon also the health, resilience is key. And then the third one is relationship. You also talked about that. We're not an island. We don't want to feel isolated. If we're able to have people that we can genuinely trust, because we've built healthy relationships, we've invested in that relationship over time. We've got to know people, right? They've got to know us. We've got healthy respect for each other. That can also be have a huge role to play, because also that links into resilience, and it links into reflection. If I've got healthy relationships, I can reflect. Like you and I, we can bounce ideas off each other. I'll be like, Faust, what do you think about this? What, Ed, BBD, have you thought about it like this or like that? So that healthy relationship, it aids reflection. It also aids resilience. They did some studies, and they found that, let's say that you're feeling stressed, and then someone who cares about you just approaches you and says, Faust, you seem a bit stressed. Is everything okay? In the studies, they found that the moment someone reaches out to you with a genuine interest in your well-being, all the markers for stress go down.
Wow.
Because immediately at that time you feel, okay, I'm not alone, right? There's other people, and you touched upon this. There's other people who are in my vicinity, in my circle, and they care about me.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, because we see, so much increasingly serious health issues, which are often stress related.
Often, very often.
Yeah, and that really tells me that increasingly, as a global society, more and more people are feeling that they're alone, or they're feeling that what they're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis is beyond their capacity. And so, to your point, these conversations are absolutely crucial, especially as we give more or create that space for reflection, create that space for resilience, and create that space for healthy relationships as well. I think that can make a big difference. And of course, from the Bhakti Yoga perspective, we would also say that amongst our relationships with each other, we also want to try and develop a very deep or spiritual connectedness with the Supreme as well.
Yes, plugging back in one way or the other.
Yeah.
People are always like, I know I should start, and I'm like, but if you know you should start, and you've known you should start, what are you waiting for? Just start. There's any number of ways to start, so you can have some fun and experiment about, what do you have, and how, all the different ways you can begin to have a daily practice.
Yes.
For me, it's made all the difference, and I'm always telling people, but you can lead a horse to water, but when they decide they're going to drink, they're going to drink. So all I do is try to put the message out and speak about what it did for me and the profound changes that I was able to make, particularly over time, because meditation, when you first start doing it, I mean, for you've been doing it from a much younger age than me, but for people who are, who have a very busy mind and they're like, I'm no good at it. Like, listen, it's not a question of being good at it or not. There is only the practice of it. There's no good or bad. Every time you do it, you're forming more and more neural circuitry to do it, to get more out of it for the next time, right? So it's like people are like, well, I tried, I just can't. I'm like, no, you can. The problem is you've given control of yourself, away. You don't even imagine that you have the power to make yourself sit, and you do, but you've forgotten. So it's an amazing thing to watch people struggle with their belief systems about themselves, and but that leads me to so the name of my podcast is Far Out with Faust. Yeah. And anyway, I love to take my guests at least a little far out. And I thought, apropos to your experience with these wonderful traditions and meditation, I was wondering if you've had if you're comfortable with sharing. If not, then there's many alternatives to this question. But I've had some mystical experiences in deep meditation and in plant ceremony, and things that are hard to explain to people, but they can't really be explained with the five senses. You kind of need the sixth. I was wondering if you had any experience that you would be willing to share.
Oh, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for the question. I think it's a very helpful question. I can honestly say that, we mentioned Kirtan, this collective, very joyful mantra meditation practice. I've had so many just amazing experiences in Kirtan. And actually, one of the constants of those experiences is just a profound sense of happiness. And sometimes people, they'll say they're happy, and there's different. My understanding is there's different grades of what people consider to be happy. Someone can give you a gift, or someone can engage in some activity, and it's very stimulating to the senses. Now the happiness I'm speaking about, which I've experienced, due to kirtan, it's not that kind of happiness. It's not like just, you got to do something external that you enjoy, but it's a happiness that I felt many times coming from the inside out and pervading my entire being. It's a simultaneous deep sense of joy, deep sense of like a positive emotion, and a deep sense of connection. Actually, yeah, that's a good word. Simultaneously joyful, positive emotions, a deep sense of connection, a deep sense of emotional release as well, because it's a very joyful call and response activity. And yeah, it's every time, whenever I think about those experiences, it's just like it just brings it back. Yeah, there's been so many experiences like that.
I could see it. It's all over your face.
Yeah, I would love everyone to be able to experience that kind of joy that comes from kirtan, that comes from spiritual connection. And I think it's of a different caliber to what people generally consider to be, happiness and so on. You may get some likes on a video,
right?
Or someone buys you something, or you even someone gets a promotion. And again, none of these things are bad in themselves,
right?
But or even you get like you get the next iPhone. In the beginning, it's like, oh, that's cool. This gadget, that gadget, it does this, it does that. But after a while, it's like, okay, it's just phone. It doesn't have that same. It doesn't leave that same impression within the heart that I feel when I've had those kinds of mantra meditation, kirtan experiences.
Yeah.
And again, like I said earlier, I feel a lot of the issues in the world come from a lack of happiness inside. I really see that. When people are unhappy, disturbed, lacking peace inside, it's inevitable that it's going to become externalized at a particular point. And then people say things that they don't mean, lash out, and they regret it often afterwards, but then often damage has been done.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer in this idea of let's work on the inner, let's work on our internals. Let's work on our inner state so that what we put out into the world is the carryover, the spillover of a certain deep joy and abundance that we're already carrying within ourselves, rather than what often happens is I'm deeply unhappy and there's some emptiness inside, and I'm trying to do so many external things just to avoid or just to kind of paper over the cracks of the deeper issue inside myself, which I'm not necessarily yet ready to face or to look at. It's more like a substitute. So that's my experience. That kirtan's been a source of deep, profound. I can't even, if I say joy, it's an understatement, like a blissful experience, and I've had that many times. And I've seen many people who've gone into kirtan or looked into kirtan, they've had similar experiences. It's indescribable.
Amazing. So hopefully people who are listening and have made it this far with us, but that maybe they'll look into themselves.
Can I just share one thing? Because just
please.
On that, if people are into kirtan, there's one, really amazing kirtan artist. She actually did something with Willow Smith, Will Smith's daughters. They actually released some music together. I think they released an album together. So if people want to check out kirtan, one of my favorites, all-time favorite, people in this space, her name is Janavi Harrison. So that's spelled Jahnavi, and then the surname is Harrison, Harrison. So her kirtans are incredible, and if anyone wants to check it out, I highly recommend her. I've known her for many years. She's a beautiful soul, very sincere, very deep, very profound person, and if anyone wants to check out Kirtan, I'd highly recommend her Kirtan.
No, that's wonderful. I'm going to check it out myself. Thank you so much for that,
Thank
and
you.
for that recommendation for people. It's a gift. I'm sure many people will check it out. I'm going to check it out. But my friend, this has been amazing. You know, I felt such a kinship to you when I met you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have made a connection with you, and I love your sincerity, you know, profundity, and the depth, you know, and the ability to really look into life and try to understand things from a deeper perspective. It's very impressive, actually, and so I'm very, very grateful that we've been able to have this dialogue and this conversation.
Thank you so much. The feeling is mutual, my friend. Nothing but respect and love for your time, and for your wisdom and for your insight. I am grateful, and I appreciate it so much. This is so cool to connect, and we'll have to do it again one day.
Yeah.
And I'll be in touch with you. I'll let you know when this is going to come out, and we'll make sure that we're coordinated in case you want to catch it. It'd be great. Thank you again for your time,
Thank
brother.
you.
Appreciate you.
Wishing you all the best, and I wish you a great week as well.
Thanks, brother. You too. You take care.
Thanks, brother. Bye.